Okay, good evening, everybody. Those of us here in council chambers and joining us on live stream, I think we've got Councillor Liu and Councillor Silovitz joining us live, and we've got Councillor Davidson, Thompson, Free, and Shu and joining us at this moment here in council chambers, and there's a couple more going to join us in a moment. So I'd just like, while we're waiting, it's 7:30 now. Councillor DiPaolo is also joining us. I'd like to read the council public hearing statement. The purpose of tonight's council public meeting is to receive comments on proposed changes to the city's community improvement plan that is intended to incentivize office development and revitalize the village area. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the city of Richmond Hill in respect of the proposed amendment to the community improvement plan, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of city council, the Ontario Land Tribunal, and may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal, unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. So this is a slightly unusual council public meeting tonight in that we're not dealing with specific development applications, but we're dealing with, as it was mentioned in the statement, the community improvement plan. So we will have a presentation as usual by our staff planner, and then we'll bring it to the community if there's any members of the public that would like to speak to it, and then we'll bring it back to council. So on the city side, we've got Megan Cobold, who is our city planner on the file. So Megan, I'll send it over to you to explain the community improvement plan update. Oh, you know what, Megan, we need to adopt the agenda first, so we'll do that right now. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor DiPaolo. All those in favor? Approved. Thank you. That passes unanimously. Over to you, Megan. Oh, wait a minute. Oh man, I'm out of practice. Okay. Disclosures of pecuniary interest. Is anybody pecuniary interested? No. Okay. Seeing none, Mr. Clerk. Now, Megan, I'm not kidding this time. Over to you.
Great. Thank you, Mayor West and members of council. This presentation is corresponding to staff report SRPI 23004 regarding the proposed updates to the Richmond Hill Office Development and Village Revitalization Community Improvement Plan. And this staff report recommends that it be received for information purposes and that all comments be referred back to staff. Next slide, please. To start, I'd like to provide some brief background information. So what is a CIP? A community improvement plan, also known as a CIP, is a tool that can help revitalize areas within a community by designating a CIP project area and providing programs such as grants in order to meet specific goals and community improvement needs. This tool enables council to provide grants, loans, and or land to private development that is otherwise not permitted under the Municipal Act. So Richmond Hill's approved CIP, it was based on background studies. And it indicated that Richmond Hill could benefit from the use of a CIP to address the need for office development in the city and also revitalization of the village. Back in 2018, a CIP was approved to provide grant programs to help fund these improvement projects. And the image on the slide just shows the cover of the current approved CIP, which is presently titled the Richmond Hill Office Development and Downtown Local Center Community Improvement Plan. And this CIP aims to incentivize the creation of new office space through redevelopment and renovations, and also aims to revitalize the historic village area of the city through aesthetic improvements. And next slide, please. Thank you. So this CIP currently offers 3 different grant programs: the Façade Landscaping and Signage Improvement Grant, the Building Renovation Grant, and the Tax Increment Equivalent Grant, or also called a TEAG. So this CIP was approved back in 2018 by council, and since then has provided grants for office development and aesthetic improvements in Richmond Hill over the past few years. To date, the city has approved 10 applications for improvement projects, which were comprised of 27 different grants. Of those 10 applications, 8 projects have been completed with payments dispersed. And the map on the slide shows where the grant programs apply in the city. They apply to areas along Yonge Street, and they also apply within the Newkirk Business Park and the Beaver Creek Business Park. And to be considered for the grant programs, applicants must submit an application form with supporting documents and meet certain eligibility requirements that are outlined in the CIP. Staff would then review and evaluate the submission as part of the approval process before the grant is approved by council. And I will now go into a bit more detail on the 3 grant programs. So first, the Façade Landscaping and Signage Improvement Grant Program. This one is designed to support the aesthetic improvements of the historic village area, which is shown in the gray color on the map. So for example, if someone was wanting to make some exterior updates to their business, such as a new sign or a new facade, they can apply to this program and they may be eligible to receive funding to help pay for their project. So this grant program has been our most popular. We've had 11 facade grants and 14 signage grants approved. And we have seen interest in the landscaping grant as well, but to date have not approved any. The before and after photos shown on the slide are an example of a past project where they received funding from this program, and it helped pay for some of the costs of the project. And this project included improvements to the building's facade and also new signage. And for this program, in terms of the maximum grant amounts, applicants can apply to receive up to 50% of the eligible costs for the improvements, up to a maximum, which are listed on the slide. For the facade grant, the maximum funding amounts are up to $15,000 for one facade, or up to $25,000 for multiple facades. For the landscaping grant, the current maximum funding amounts are up to $2,500 for one frontage, or up to $5,000 for multiple frontages. And as part of the proposed update to the CIP, there is a note on the slide indicating that we are proposing to increase this maximum to $5,000 and $10,000 respectively. And this is to better align with the costs of these types of projects and to help increase the uptake on this grant. And lastly, for the signage grant, the maximum funding amount is $2,500 and could be for either replacing the signage or enhancing the existing signage. Next slide, please. The next program is the Building Renovation Grant. And this program aims to provide funding for projects where you're converting either industrial, commercial, or residential space into new office space. And there has been interest in this program as well, and the city has approved 2 of these grants to date. In terms of funding amounts, currently applicants can apply to receive up to 50% of the eligible costs for the renovation, up to $50,000. And again, as part of the proposed update to the CIP, back in April, a recommendation to increase this grant amount to $100,000 was approved in principle by council, and this was to better align with the actual costs of these types of projects. So in terms of where it applies to the areas shown on the map in the red hatching color, which is the historic village area, the Oak Ridges Local Center, Newkirk Business Park, and also the Beaver Creek Business Park. And the before and after photos on the slide are an example of another project where the city was able to help support it through the grant program. And this project involved converting existing retail space into office space in the interior, and it also involved facade and signage improvements as well. Okay, next slide, please. So the last grant program is the Tax Increment Equivalent Grant, or also known as a TEAG. And this program is designed to support the development of new office space by providing relief from the increase in property tax at a depreciating rate over 10 years. So for example, the property owner or developer would pay the full cost of the new office development and the resulting increase in property taxes. Then the city would grant back an amount equal to a portion of the property tax increase on a declining basis over a maximum period of 10 years. So the table on the slide, it's just an illustrative example of how the grant payments would work. So in this example, after the new office building is built, the property taxes increased by $50,000. So for the first year, the applicant would get back 90% of that amount, which is $45,000. And then the next year they would get 80% back. And then the next year, 70% back, and so on for the next 10 years. And so in the end, in this example, the applicant would end up getting back $225,000 from the city over the 10-year period. And in terms of eligibility for this program, it applies to the areas shown on the map outlined in the green color, which again are along Yonge Street and also the Newkirk and Beaver Creek business parks. And this program also has a minimum of 1,600 square meters of new office space that would need to be proposed, and it can be for standalone buildings or also mixed-use developments. So this concludes the overview of the 3 grant programs, and I'll now go over the proposed updates to the CIP in more detail. Okay, back in April, the following was approved in principle by council. First, a 5-year extension to the grant programs. So currently it's set to expire in February. So this extension will allow for additional time for landowners and business owners to submit grant applications as demand for office space in the city and the desire to improve the exterior aesthetics of properties located in the village is still expected. Next is increased funding for the building renovation grant to a maximum of $100,000, as mentioned earlier. And this is to better align with the costs of these types of projects. And next is to carry over an unspent amount of $142,000 from the previous year. Next is to have an annual operating budget of $250,000. And lastly is to promote the CIP programs to the business community. So with the approval in principle of these recommendations, staff have undertaken the formal process for amending the CIP along with a promotional campaign. And I'll now provide an overview of the promotional campaign and also the consultation undertaken as part of the update process. So staff in the Richmond Hill Center and Economic Development Division provided a variety of promotions for the current CIP. The campaign was from July to October, and it had included e-newsletters to various businesses, social media posts, which included general information on the grant programs with before and after photos of past projects, and also information on upcoming consultation sessions. And they also did some direct mailouts to businesses. And next slide, please. So in terms of the consultation, back in the fall, policy planning staff held joint information sessions with economic development staff to the board members of the Richmond Hill BIA, the business improvement area, and also the Board of Trade. So they were provided an overview of the grant programs and also had the opportunity to provide comments and ask questions. Most of the comments received were regarding the need to update the city's zoning bylaws and official plan. There were questions on the program uptake, comments on absentee landlords and the ability to make investments in the renovations. And to date, we have not received any additional feedback. And while efforts have been made to consult with the public via updates to our webpage, email notices, and an ad in the Liberal, we have not received additional comments to date. And staff have also consulted internally with staff regarding heritage information, landscaping costs, and information on economic development and office development in the city. Next slide, please. So in addition to the proposed updates that were approved in principle by council back in April, and based on the feedback we received, there are a number of additional proposed updates included in the draft amendment. And many of these proposed updates are for clarification purposes or to address minor technical updates. So this table just describes the various additional updates. So first are the funding amounts. It's recommended to increase the landscaping grant from the current $2,500 to $5,000 for a single frontage, and the current $5,000 to $10,000 for multiple frontages. And after receiving feedback, it was advised to increase these amounts to better account for the cost of these types of projects and also to incentivize landscaping improvements in the village. Next, it's recommended to clarify certain eligibility criteria to provide more information to applicants. So this includes providing more examples of eligible costs for the landscaping grant for information purposes to assist applicants in the approval process. Secondly, clarifying that eligible projects for the building renovation grant can include projects that support the adaptive reuse of heritage buildings in the city's inventory of cultural heritage resources for office use or other non-residential uses. And this was described in a previous staff report, but not clearly stated in the CIP document itself before. Next, the current CIP provides, thank you. Next, the current CIP provides funding amounts for signage grants on a per property basis. So it is recommended that the signage grant amounts are updated to be per business unit instead of per property. And this will help provide more opportunities for properties in the village that contain more than one business and typically have multiple business signs. Next, it's recommended to clarify that projects must wait for council approval of their grant application before starting the work. And this is to help ensure that funding will be available to the applicant once the project is completed, and that staff will be able to review proposals and provide feedback before in case changes are needed. So next, it's recommended to clarify what changes to the CIP would require a formal amendment requiring council approval. So currently, the CIP requires council approval if a significant change to the boundary of the area subject to the CIP is made. So it's recommended that this be updated to clarify that changes to a grant program's boundaries as a result of an official plan amendment or BIA bylaw amendment would not require council approval. As the city is currently in the process of updating the official plan, new land use designations along with any mapping or name changes may be a result and therefore may differ from what's shown in the CIP. So this update is proposed so that the CIP will be up to date and consistent with the other documents. And lastly, there are a few minor technical updates proposed as well. So this includes updating some of the some of the names, such as replacing the word town with the word city, or replacing the word downtown with the word village. And this is to help with consistency and accuracy. And this also includes renaming the CIP from the Richmond Hill Office Development and Downtown Local Center CIP to the Richmond Hill Office Development and Village Revitalization CIP. And lastly, the information from the CIP's Appendix A is proposed to be moved into Section 4 just to help with readability. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of the next steps for the updates on the grant programs, so subject to any comments we've received, staff will bring the proposed amendment to the CIP to council for approval in February 2023. And if there are no appeals, the proposed changes would come into effect 20 days thereafter. And next slide, please. And finally, the recommendation in the staff report is that the staff report be received for information purposes and that all comments be referred back to staff. And this concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Megan. And I don't believe, Mr. Clerk, that we have anybody that signed up as a delegation, and we have our seats are empty in front of us. So I'll move right on to council then to hear comments from council. So, okay, Councillor Twee, and if you would be so kind as to make a recommendation, a motion to send all comments heard tonight back to staff, we can get the ball rolling.
I have a few questions I want to classify with staff.
Okay, can you move the motion as well and then ask the questions?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so you'll move the motion and go ahead with your questions.
Okay, thank you so much. As for you, Mr. Chair, to our staff, Megan, I do have two questions. First one, just for my personal information only. What is the tax increment equivalent grant? What's the purpose of that one?
Okay, so to staff.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So the purpose of the tax increment equivalent grant is to provide new office development. So this would apply for anyone proposing new office development in those areas that were highlighted in that green color. And there's certain eligibility criteria there that they would need to meet as well. But in general, it's for new office development.
Okay, regarding to the building renovation grant, I see all the green color over there is overlap, right? If you have the red color or gray color there, it means you can apply for both proposal, right?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's correct. You can apply for multiple grants. Some of our past projects have included multiple grant types, so they might have been building and renovation grant, a new sign grant, and a new facade grant. So you can definitely combine them together.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. My last question will be the fundings. Just curiosities. Where is this money coming from? It's from city or from any bank or from federal government? Where is the money come from? Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. So the money right now would be coming from the city. We did have a previous funding amount that was supported through a provincial initiative, but that ended in 2020. So for now, it would just be funding from the city.
Good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion on the floor. Councillor Davidson, you have some questions. Would you like to second that motion before you ask questions? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Is there, I guess the word village, are you referring to specifically, when you talk about Richmond Hill Village, you mean sort of the area north of Major Mackenzie on Yonge Street and south of Elgin Mills, right? But this money is available to any part. I kind of think of Oak Ridges as a village, but I'm assuming you mean that particular spot. What is the village? Is the village only the downtown part of Richmond Hill that's narrow and older? Yes.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, the village area that we're describing here specifically for the facade landscape and signage grant applies to the properties located within the BIA bylaw boundary. So that does include areas within our current titled downtown local center and other properties, but it follows the BIA bylaw boundary.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair. So I guess I can talk to you at another time, but I'm not really clear on what's available to the other areas that were marked on the grid, including Yonge and King. What kind of, so the facade and the landscaping, is any of that available to other areas that were on that map?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So the facade landscaping and signage grant, that only applies to the village area. That the village area also has the ability to provide grants for the building renovation and the TIG as well. But the facade landscaping and signage grant only applies to the village area.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair. So the grants available to the other areas on the map would be the tax decrease over time. Would that be the only and the main thing that's available to other areas?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the other grants, the building renovation grant applies to the Oak Ridges Local Center, the village area, the Newkirk Business Park, and also the Beaver Creek Business Park. For the tax increment equivalent grant, that applies to all of the CIP areas. So that includes the Oak Ridges Local Center, the village area, the other areas along Yonge Street that were shown in the map. There's quite a few listed, and the two other business parks, the Newkirk and Beaver Creek Business Park.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm thinking it might be beneficial if we could actually get that slide back up that actually showed exactly what Councillor Davidson was actually asking about, that had the shading and the green outlines and so forth. Is that possible to get that back up on screen? So for myself, being Ward 2 and having the BIA completely inside there, so you can see the sort of grayed out spot that it shows the whole facade landscaping and signage. So, and it's also outlined in green, and it's also got the red. So it seems to me the BIA basically can avail themselves of every possible grant that is, or the businesses within the BIA can avail themselves of all the possible grants. So having said that, and in reading the documents here, I was a little unclear at first about what the property requirements were. So if a property currently is vacant, would it be my understanding that they could still apply for all those grants, even though they don't have a building yet? They could still get the facade as part of that grant program. That's one of my questions. Thank you.
For you, Mr. Chair, so the facade landscaping and signage improvement grants in the village area, they would apply for buildings that are they apply to non-residential buildings. So anything that would be a non-residential building, they could apply for that grant.
Thank you. So through you, Mr. Chair, just to be clear, even though a building hasn't gone up yet, so they've got a vacant property, they would just, as part of their proposal, they would identify what they feel is going to be the amount that would be attributed to the facade portion of that new build, as long as it's non-residential.
Through you, Mr. Sorry about that. I misunderstood. So if there's nothing on the property, the only grant that I believe would apply would be the tax increment equivalent grant if they were proposing a new office building of at least 1,600 square meters. The other two grants would be for an existing building that they are either renovating to convert non-office space into office space, or improving an existing facade or landscaping or signage.
Thank you. So through you, Mr. Chair, if I'm hearing correctly, then you really have to have a building already to avail yourself of those particular grants then.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the TEAG could apply to a vacant property.
So it would qualify as a renovation, although there isn't a building that they're renovating.
Correct. It would be for new office a new office building.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, you'd also indicated about the landscaping, and you talked about single frontages versus multi-unit frontages. Could I just get a little bit of a clarification on what's that mean? Because everything before this was talking about by property. So I'm assuming that we could have a property that has multiple businesses within that property, and that's how the whole facade could roll out. I was a little unclear.
So through you, Mr. Chair, so the facade grant, there is a different maximum amount depending on how many frontages are being improved. So if only one frontage is being improved, there's a grant maximums up to 15,000. And if there's more than one facade being improved, the maximum grant amount is 25,000. And we do take priority for evaluating applications for the property that would be street facing, so the most publicly facing street.
Okay, so if I'm hearing through you, Mr. Chair, if I'm hearing this correctly, then a property could have multiple frontages and that you're, they don't necessarily have to be updating one or all three. If they had three, they could be updating just one, and then that would fall into the matrix you're talking about on the funding. Okay. Thank you. My final one, we talked about carryover, and just wanting to know how does that carryover work? Does it carry over into budget, or does that carry over into reserve?
Ms. Cobold?
I may need to ask Sibel for the question for this. I believe it goes through. Sorry, 1 second. I may have to ask Sibel for the answer for this question.
She's there. Sibel, go ahead.
Sure, through you, Chair. Yeah, the budget carryover will come through the operating budget. So I believe there's in April or May when we identify items to be carried over, and this will be one of them. And the real reason for this is we may have approved a grant, but they haven't completed the work that is being granted for within the same budget cycle. So we want to ensure that funding that was allocated towards that project is available in the following budget cycle so that we can pay out the grant when all of the works are completed.
Through you, the Mayor. Thank you. That definitely helps. Thank you very much. So that's all my questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor. Regional Local Councillor Chan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You have a seconder for the motion already, I think.
Yes, right? I do.
Thank you. As actually the Chair of Economic Development last term, I think this is something very much that advocated by the Economic Development Committee, and I, for one, as really a proponent for this. And it was great last time council agreed to the extension of this CIP program. And looking forward, through Mr. Chair, that speaker before me asked about a question about carry forward, although it's one of my questions, but it's been answered. One of the things is that I honestly feel that what you're asking council here to comment in principle, I would say being someone who always gung-ho about doing things that we can reasonably do within the resources that we have to attract particular new and also retain existing business to expand. These are actually initiatives we ought to continue. So that's a comment. And turning to maybe seeking clarification, I'm wondering through you, Mr. Chair, perhaps to staff, on the one of the recommended, I gather, would be expansion, so to speak, is to about the signs. And comments would make about, or not comments, report did talk about that would be to the businesses units versus like a building per se. Specifically is referenced on the last paragraph on the staff report to page 6. So help me understand. It touches on multiple business signs. How is it going to be, I guess, coordinated? Let's say if there are 3 businesses upstairs in the building on the village core and other 2 buildings in the ground floor. Help me understand and to visualize that would be play out. So you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Cobold?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So some of the properties in the village, they might have one property address, which is what the CIP was referring to, but we're just trying to clarify that if you have multiple business units within that same property address, you can apply for multiple signage grants. So it's not just one grant that could apply to that address. And in addition, they do need to be, any sign improvements would have to be in accordance with the sign bylaw.
Thank you. Now on the slide number 9 that was presented tonight, and it's also mentioned in the report, in the staff report. I was a bit surprised that there appears to be no feedback from either the business community as well as from the general public. Would it be helpful? I know it's meant to be bringing back in February, which is not too long from now. Is that at all possible that maybe a follow-up attempt may be undertaken between now and then? Or the staff would feel we did our part, we try consult the 2 groups, which is the BIA as well as the Board of Trade. So you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Kwan, it looks like you might want to answer that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I understand the comments from Councillor Chan. I would suggest, though, that the staff have, this was presented last year and Council adopted the recommendations in principle. And as staff have indicated, we have reached out to the various stakeholders and they've given us some useful feedback in how to improve the plan itself, but certainly there was no question or pushback about the principles of the plan. And in fact, this is really, from my perspective, a good news story because we're talking about further incentivizing businesses and properties within the city under these various programs. So I'm looking at this as a success program, and we're further enhancing it to even make it more attractive, especially during these more difficult times of economic strain on the community.
Thank you. Just actually, I'm so glad that Commissioner mentioned about the positive aspect. Anytime you're expanding the grant, that will be helping to stimulate and hopefully that attract, as I mentioned earlier on, new investment and retain existing business are welcome. It's certainly a good news story. There's no doubt about that. So a comment would be that particular note in the middle of page 5 of the staff report that public investment in private businesses result in choice investments from those businesses and spin-off effects. Perhaps it's not the job for our planning staff when come back in February. I mean, this is comment. Maybe can also enlist the, input from our economic development team to help with something about more substantiate that. That would be very helpful and certainly a good news story. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm very happy to support the motion. Let's do it sooner than later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody else that would like to comment? Okay, seeing none. I actually, it's been an excellent presentation. It was an excellent staff report, and I am familiar with the program that we initiated, and this is just really an update to the program. So I don't actually have that many, any questions. I think that staff has done a good job in getting out and getting information and feedback from the public, and I thank them for that. I think it is not surprising in my mind anyway that the general public isn't necessarily chomping at the bit to comment on this particular program. I think what the general public wants is, office space for jobs and nice looking shops and services in various areas of town that need a little bit of help to make sure that happens. But how they get there, I think this is a very reasonable and targeted way to do that. And so I'm a big fan of this program. The area in downtown or village core that has, I believe, taken advantage of this extends for a good part of the area from, well, I mean, if you include the theater, from the theater all the way to just south of Center Street West. And that whole section looks really nice. And I'm stand to be corrected, but I'm pretty sure that many of the buildings in that block took advantage of this, as did another building further south in around the churches on Yonge Street. It's a good program, and I think the next step in this, and I think staff knows this, I know they know this, is to get the word out to as many business owners as possible that will take advantage of this grant, because, you know, we're basically investing in some revitalization in places like the Village Core. And we're also investing in giving back to help to incentivize office development where we need office development. You know, those things provide a benefit to our community. And so I think this program, you know, provides a targeted incentive to do the things that we want landowners to do in order to provide a benefit for our community. So thank you for this program. As I said, I think the key to this program will be to keep the understanding in the public that it is available to the stakeholders should they want to do it. You know, we as councillors can have some effect in that when we're out talking to some of these businesses that might qualify for some of these different grants. And I know that we'll keep up the public relations campaign to make sure that the other stakeholders know about it. So thanks very much for staff. I appreciate that we have a motion on the floor to refer all these comments back to staff. And I will look forward to this coming to council for approval in the near future. So without further ado, all those in favor of the motion before us, opposed, seeing none, that carries unanimously, Mr. Clerk. So now we have the task of getting somebody to do a motion to adjourn. Councillor DiPaolo, Councillor Tree, all those in favor? That's unanimous too.